Welcome back to another episode of the Bare Naked Solar Podcast. I am your host, Rebecca, and we're here to strip down bits of information about different solar knowledge topics. Before we begin, don't forget to follow us right here on Spotify and YouTube, and don't forget to check out our website, sunpowerbysunandus.com. Today, we have a special guest, Senyo Ador. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. If you don't mind, we're going to be a little comfy. We'll get to know each other a little bit. And I just have some questions to ask you because we really love your story here at SunPower by Sun and Us, and we just want to learn a little bit more about you.
Thank you. Fire away.
All right, perfect. So first question, could you elaborate on your background and how your family's engineering legacy influenced your career in clean energy?
I would love to. That's one of my favorite things to elaborate on. My grandfather was a German-trained civil engineer in Ghana, West Africa. A lot of my uncles were engineers as well. One in particular, my Uncle William, he was actually a power generation in the gas industry engineer. My father actually welded on the first dam in Ghana, so it was a hydro dam called a Kosombo. It's like a famous power or a landmark, if you will, in the country. So just having like all the layers of history, I would say, in there really informed my pathway, my direction. It was something that I think initially I was kind of like reticent to accept. I was always kind of like a strong writer, so I thought I would be like, I don't know, like Langston Hughes or somebody like that. But I think the more I kind of came into myself, I understood that, I could make a wider kind of impact with some of my more natural talents in the technical realm, and then be able to maybe like tell the narrative or inform the narrative with my skills, like as a writer or orator.
That's so cool. It's so rare when you hear someone has such an extensive background like this, but that's pretty cool. You have all these different engineers in your family and you're like, you know what, I want to get into this space. I want to do more. I want to tell my story.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. You've definitely influenced us. So
Thank you.
That's amazing. All right. Question number 2. What inspired you to transition from working on fossil fuel projects to focusing on clean energy and sustainable development?
So it wasn't so much a pivot from fossil to clean energy, but it was more so a pivot from like industry as I understood it to like more impact work. When I was first hired by General Electric, they kind of like take you to this university. It's called Schenectady U. It's in upstate New York in Schenectady. And that's where a lot of like the first like Westinghouse machines were built. There's like a whole history of like GE engineering and technology that's housed there. And it's kind of like a 10-month like brainwashing, like, all right, yeah, whatever you learned in college like has no relevance here. This is the GE way to do it. But what struck me in that experience was, at that point I had been a degreed electrical engineer out of Southern Illinois in Carbondale. And while I was going through a course on synchronous and asynchronous machines, a cohort of Polish students, like directly from Poland, all like 15, 16 years old, were like going through the same program that I was going through as a college graduate. And I think at that point a light bulb went off, and it was really like it became a question of how can I utilize like my experience, my network, my wherewithal in the industry to provide access. Because once you provide access, particularly at a young age, it demystifies something that otherwise would feel unapproachable. So just having like the mere confidence to say, as a 16-year-old, I can do the same work as a college graduate is powerful. And I didn't feel like that should be reserved for certain individuals. It should be accessible to everyone. And that way you can unearth, like talented people come from all different demographics, right? Like how do we do that for, the disadvantaged or underrepresented in our communities? And then, beyond that, like what's the ROI? Do you find the next like Nikola Tesla or Edison in that demographic, right? So I just kind of charged myself with being somebody that worked, in parallel with industry, but like I guess my cross or to bear is really impact. Like how do we get this to the people that need it the most?
That's cool. So you had like this vision, you're like, I really want to take this and run with it.
Immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, as I was working as an engineer in Fossil, I was, I just had this nagging thing that was pulling at me that said like, you're supposed to be in engineering, that's who and what you are, but like, how is this impacting like community? Because you're not, as an engineer, gonna, spread the mission like wildfire. But if you could like the whole Tupac saying, like if you can spark the mind of the next one, then who knows, the avalanche that could build up from there, and then the worldwide or the global impact, that can come from that. So
yeah, no, I love that too, because you're giving these people a chance that probably nobody's even thought to give them a chance, right?
Exactly. And you can see like these guys are, a lot of them are, maybe dejected in a lot of ways and just feel like society's maybe turned their back on them, or they just are just essentially, disinterested depending on who the messenger is, right? So I'm coming from a culture that they understand, like the vernacular they can understand, but the requirements, the technical requirements and the specs are the same across the board. So the same stuff that I'm teaching is the same stuff that they're teaching everywhere else. I'm just more maybe relatable for a lot of different reasons. And I think that's a worthwhile exercise to be able to like turn over the proverbial rock and find a diamond in the rough somewhere that otherwise would have been, skipped over. So I'm in a very like unique space, right? It's not for everyone, but for those that do entertain me, I hope that I add some value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's
Thank
huge,
you.
huge. All right, question number 3. Can you share some specific experiences or projects that highlighted the transformative power of clean energy, especially in rural electrification in Ghana?
For sure. So not just like clean energy, but I think like sustainability as a whole. There was a project in northern Ghana that our company, Technology Management Group in Ghana, shout out to TMG, we pulled off was it was a biomass project, right? So in that part of Ghana, it's a heavy like shea nut or shea fruit producing community. And just like it sounds, right, like that product ultimately becomes shea butter, right, in the cosmetic industry. So, when you think about the natural capital there, which is like the shea nut, you want to think about the life cycle of that particular nut. And for the most part, it just ends up in the commercial industry because the cosmetic industry, because that's where I guess the economics drive things, right? But we had to think through the different uses of that shea nut. So for example, when you crack open the shell and you press the nut itself, right, there's an oil extract and fat that can be used to, whip the shea butter that we all know and, we all buy at the store. But then outside of that, the pulp that remains is actually high in vitamin C and potassium. So that can be almost, in certain parts of like Ghana, Burkina Faso, Faso and Mali, it's considered like a superfood because of its traditional nutritional value, right? And then at the end of the life cycle, you have the shells themselves that can be corralled along with the pulp if it's not consumed, and actually formed into like fuel balls to be burnt to generate electricity and heat, right? So I mean, just that demonstration, I feel like is a very like transformative exercise of how you take, you know, a shea nut that has this traditional use or this popularized use and try to like use it as sustainably as possible, potentially generating jobs and, you know, improving like the whole like environmental impact equation. You know, so that's one project that stands out in my mind. That was super cool.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that. Like I knew that about the nut, right? But that's so cool. Like,
absolutely, yeah.
Did you guys know? I had no idea. Mind blown. God, well, I love that too because you're thinking about the entire life cycle, right?
For sure.
Like you have this very creative mind as an engineer, right? Where you're like, okay, I'm not just thinking like, okay, I'm gonna do my job A to Z. No, you're thinking about everything in between that you can do to make it sustainable.
Absolutely.
Which is so important today, and a lot of businesses say they are, but they're not, right? So that's
you talk
amazing.
about the greenwash effect, right?
Yeah.
So.
It's cool to be green right now, or say that you're green.
It's been cool. The lames are just catching up to the rest of us.
They are. They're jumping on the bandwagon.
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. All right. Few more questions for you.
Of course.
All right. Tell us a little bit more about your company and the services it provides to developers. What are some key projects that you've been involved in?
Okay, so we're primarily so it's two parts. Design build on one side, and it's really around sustainability goals. So whether it's like energy efficiency goals that a client might have, or they want to get involved in renewable energy, we can design and at times build those projects out, just depending on who's involved. The other side of the house is focused on the workforce development impact work that we described. And the idea, again, is like being life cycle focused is if we're doing workforce dev and we're reaching into communities and we're saying, hey, like join the clean energy transition, there's actually jobs in the green economy, then we want to be able to fight to actually have jobs to put people on, just to give them a taste, even if it's not sustainable in the context of here is a 15-year career. You're developing valuable experience, whether it's project management or marketing or sales. That's something that you have under your tool belt that you can either serve Synergy with or you can serve the larger ecosystem with. So it's always that idea of how do we leverage sustainability to get more value out. I think that's really what, sustainability is all about, is how do you do the most with, the little that you have. So that's kind of our mandate and our mission.
That's cool. So when you said like renewable energy projects, are you guys focusing on like solar, or is it wind, or is it all the above?
Yeah, I mean, primarily solar is like the easiest conversation to have with folks, right? Because it's accessible, but I mean, we do heat pumps, we do hot water tank replacements, we do lighting retrofits, right?
Yeah.
It just depends on who the client is. We've built a greenhouse, and a lot of like the irrigation controls were powered by solar, so there's that integration between food and energy that's kind of inextricably linked, so again, it's part of like that creative model. It just depends on who the client is, what their goals are, and if we can entertain them in taking the walk with us, essentially.
That's cool. So it's very catered.
Yeah, it's
whatever your
kind of
customer is interested in, or client. Yeah.
Exactly. It's
cool.
custom, and we have a suite of engineering support that we try not to quote unquote over-engineer a project because economics matters, sustainability of the solution matters, but we're enjoying the moment now that everybody's like more like green attuned, and we're able to have these really, out of this world like conversations with folks like, hey, we want geothermal and we want this and we want that, and it's, technically like there's no shot at getting geothermal in some of these spaces, but the fact that it's actually coming up in these design meetings and conversations, I think is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
For sure.
When we first started our company, it was tough. It was really tough to have conversations about anything around renewable energy.
For sure.
And today I feel like our clients know more than us, or they think they know more than us
There you go.
because they read up on it. But it's cool. It's cool. At least they're open now to have this conversation with us, which makes that transition so much easier.
For sure.
To talk to them about a catered design for their home. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. All right. Last question. Okay. In your opinion, how can clean energy and sustainability impact underprivileged or marginalized communities, both in the U.S. and places like Ghana?
Well, I mean, I think, the CEJA program is probably an example of, the intention of policymakers really making sure that the economics of an industry has value that goes all the way down to the grassroots level. I've never seen more intentional policy making at least in my career. Yeah. So it really, I look at Illinois as a flag bearer in terms of energy sovereignty, the equity equation. Like, forget just putting incentives on, putting up solar farms and just having solar as in general. I think they set the environment, they set the rules of the game, and it allows, the participants to be as creative as they can in how they can bring value to the table. For a long time, folks were shut out of that conversation, and I think that the more inclusivity you have, right? The more ideas you have in the ecosystem, the more value comes into the ecosystem. So, with that said, you see clean energy and sustainability in terms of workforce development, providing jobs for people that otherwise, may not have gainful or meaningful employment. It's building confidence for the folks that are actually coming through my program. And then a small business like mine is actually a benefactor of a clean energy jobs accelerator, right? So being incubated as a small company allows you to kind of be more sustainable long-term and add value to the community. If I just had, and me and my partners had the idea, but no support, like they say, most businesses are close their doors in 5 to 7 years, right? So we would have been on that track as opposed to, the course we're set on now. So for a host of reasons, I think clean energy and sustainability, really bring value to the community.
Yeah, no, CEJA, I mean, so I just had a training today. So we had a couple of new hires, and they're from California. And I told them, like, California or every other state besides Illinois, it's like the wild, wild west when it comes to anything renewable energy.
Absolutely.
And we're the only state that has, like you said, not only incentives, but it's regulated, and it builds this foundation where you can build around it. Like, having this structure gives you the opportunity to help growth.
Exactly.
Right? And we're big on that. We're big on hiring people from all different backgrounds. I mean, right now we have 5 different employees from 5 different countries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it just happened that way. And we're like, oh my goodness, like one's from Hungarian, the other one's from Jordan, Ukrainian, China, I forgot the other person, but I was just like, this is so cool.
So you think about
super
all
cool.
those different approaches to solving a problem. Like, that's what you want at the table.
Absolutely, and they're all from those countries, right? They were born and raised there,
Wow.
and they came here either when they were 16 or their early 20s.
Okay.
And it's so cool that we're able to help them provide for their families, right? They have this opportunity and to do something good,
Yep.
right? Like it's not
Exactly.
like we're just here talking about and educating people about a product that everyone else is doing. No, this is a product that's going to be the better good for everyone
That's it.
in every aspect.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do better than that, right?
You can't. I agree. Well, Senyo, thank you so much today. I really appreciate you coming.
No, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you again for joining us today. And don't forget to follow us right here on Spotify and YouTube. Thanks, everyone.